Hello and welcome to Precon Decon, the video series where I deconstruct the pre-constructed decks of Magic the Gathering's history. In this video we'll be looking at the last of the theme decks from the Odyssey set, and it is Trounce-o-Matic, which might be a contender for the worst theme deck name ever. But it's green-blue, which I'm excited about because I really like green and blue. So let's dive in, let's have a look at it. So we have 21 creatures, we have 10 instants, a single enchantment, 4 sorceries, 24 land, and we have a mana curve off to the side there. So let's take a look at this deck. So, bunch of green creatures. So, the big theme of this deck is hitting threshold and your creature's getting better. Which is a similar theme to the first one we looked at in Odyssey, which is Liftoff. However, this deck I think does a much better job of it. And I'll explain how as we look through these. So unfortunately, we're going to start off with Crashing Centaur, which is not a wonderful creature in my opinion. So 6 mana for 3/4, which is horrible. You can pay a green and discard a card to give it trample end of turn. That's not wonderful. When you have Threshold, he has +2/+2, so it becomes 5/6, and he has Shroud. So that's quite strong, especially for the time. And the fact that you can pay green and discard a card just means you can hit threshold a bit quicker by using that ability. So yeah, it's still not ideal, but yeah, the Shroud is definitely a nice bonus there. So 2 Diligent Farmhands, 1 mana for a 1/1, 1 card in the green, sacrifice it, search your library for a basic land, put it into play tapped, then shuffle, so it's fine, rampant growth on legs, essentially. Not as good as Sakura Tribe Elder, who we'll see when we get to Kamigawa, when we finally get to Kamigawa. But yeah, I think that's okay. He also had an extra effect. If he's in a graveyard, Muscle Burst's effect counts it as a Muscle Burst. What is Muscle Burst? Well, we will get to Muscle Burst in due course. So one of the rares deck is Ivy Elemental. Just X mana, comes in with X +1/+1 counts on it. Fine, but a little boring. This I think has been downshifted, quite rightly so, to uncommon in recent years. I think it's in Ikoria. It's uncommon now. I don't understand why it's just not common. It's just very boring. I think it's not really wowing me, honestly. And then 2 Croson Avengers, 3 mana for a 3/1 trample, which is it's all right, I guess. But when you have Threshold, it has 1 card and 1 green to regenerate. So 2 mana regeneration is sort of okay. And then offsets obviously that low toughness. So this is kind of like the meat of the deck. I think is all these creatures here that get just a straight power boost when you hit threshold, like the Crashing Centaur, but these are just a bit more straightforward. So Metamorphic Worm is 5 mana for a 3/3, which is not great, but when you have threshold, it gets +4/+4, so it becomes a 7/7. And also it's an elephant worm. I don't know how you can argue with that. That's just very cool. It's an elephant worm. Yeah, just the fact that it could be a 7/7 for 5 mana is, I think, pretty strong. 2 Nimble Mongoose, 1/1 for 1 mana, has Shroud. And when you have Threshold, it gets +2/+2. That's pretty good. Again, 3/3 for Shroud for only a single mana. Pretty good. Springing Tiger is probably the most boring of the bunch. 4 mana for a 3/3, which is like an okay rate at this time. That's basically a hill giant. And when you have Threshold, it has +2/+2. So 5/5 for 4 mana, again, is again, that's pretty good. It's pretty, above curve, honestly. And then the other row of the deck is Stone Tongue Basilisk, so whopping 7 mana for a 4/5. Whenever it deals combat damage to a creature, destroy that creature at end of combat. So it's not Death Touch. It's worse than Death Touch because you have to wait until end of combat. But when you hit threshold, it gets a lure effect. All creatures that have to able to block it do so. So then it can just divide out its damage. No, it can't divide out its damage by new rules because of the M10 change. Of course, it doesn't have Death Touch. It can't divide out its damage. It would have been fine at the time. These days, that's just not as good as it is. It still only kills like one thing, basically. or potentially 2, depending what blocks. Anyway, getting off topic there. It's okay. It's it's just very, very expensive. We have a single Twig Walker. It's a 2/2 for 3, and you can sacrifice it for 2 mana. 2 target creatures each get +2/+2 turn 10. That's okay, I think. Like, it's fine. The one downside is that the ability, it has to target 2 creatures exactly. If you only have like 1 creature out, you can't do it, or you might have to target an opponent's creature. It's kind of like with Symbiosis in the Urza's decks we looked at like a while ago. The same problem with that card. And then we have 2 All-Stars of Odyssey block. Werebear, who is 2 mana for a 1/1, taps to give you green, and we have Threshold, gets +3/+3, so your mana dork becomes a genuinely good attacker and blocker. Yeah, Werebear's great. Absolute all-star of the set. And also Wild Mongrel. So 2 mana for a 2/2 with an upside, so it's immediately better than Grizzly Bears, which doesn't take much. But I mean, at the time, okay, again, this like context is so important. At the time, being a 2/2 for 2 with a beneficial ability was a big deal. And Wild Mongrel's ability is a big deal. So you can discard a card to give it +1/+1 to turn, and it becomes the color of your choice. So the free discard to give it +1/+1 is very good. It helps you get to Threshold quicker, which then affects all your whole board. The ability to change color is super random. I honestly don't know why it has that as an ability, but again, it would have mattered. Because this again, a time where a lot of black removal spells can't kill black creatures. So someone's like, "Oh, I'm going to target your Wild Mongrel." Like, okay, discard a card. It's black now. You can't kill it. So yeah, definitely would have mattered. And yeah, and like protection from color abilities were more of a thing as well. So him being able to get around it would have mattered. Yeah, so Wild Mongrel, super good. Interesting fact: it is part of a cycle. There is a dog in every color. The other 4 are terrible, which is why no one really knows that it's part of a cycle. The white one's actually not awful; it's just very average. But the blue, black, and red ones are all absolutely dreadful. But yeah, Wild Mongrel, great card for Odyssey block, and would go on to fuel the all the blue-green madness decks that would dominate standard. And then just a single blue creature, Cephalid Looter, 2 of those. Target player draws a card and discards a card from hand. So you can do that to yourself to get to Threshold quicker by discarding. Or if you really want to, you could do it on your opponent to make them discard something. Generally not advised to do that, but it's nice that you have the option to do it. A bunch of green spells. So we have a Ceton's Desire. This is an aura, 3 mana, gives a creature +2/+2. When you have Threshold, the creature also gets a Lure ability, which is pretty good. Like, Lure ability is always, I think very strong. Just lets you swing out with everything while all your opponent's creatures have to deal with, a token or something. A single Sylvan Might. This is one of the pump spells of the block. It's 2 mana to give +2/+2 and trample on turn, and you can flash it back. Flashback being a major mechanic of the set, where if it's in your graveyard, you can play the flashback cost and you get to play it again. Overrun, which is really lovely to see in this deck. I really like Overrun. 5 mana to give all your creatures +3/+3 and trample on turn. Just wins games, doesn't it? Just absolutely wins games. So Muscle Burst is one of the other pump spells. So 2 mana, target creature gets +X on a turn, where X is 3 plus the number of Muscle Burst cards in all graveyards. So the first one you do is +3/+3. The next one is +4/+4. So yeah, these are really fun. I actually would have liked to have more of these instead of Sylvan Might in the deck. But you do technically have more because you have Diligent Farmhand, and when Diligent Farmhand is in the graveyard, it counts as a Muscle Burst. So yeah, that's pretty fun. And a single Roar of the Worm, 7 mana, which is very expensive to put a 6/6 green worm into play, but you can flash back for only 4 mana, and you have so many ways of discarding cards in here. Which was this card showed up a lot in like blue-green madness decks and standard. I'm veering off by talking about standard, which I don't usually do in these reviews, but like blue green, blue green during Odyssey was like that was the color combination to use, because the two colors had so much synergy with each other. But yeah, you can discard this to Wild Mongrel, and then you can get a worm for 4 mana. Very good. And then a bunch of blue spells. So we have 2 Peaks, which is 1 blue mana to look at a player's hand and you draw a card. It seems like a little bit of a weak effect. I'm gonna, because this was in the Liftoff deck. I'm gonna backpedal on that a little bit. It's not a weak effect, yeah, because obviously looking at your opponent's hand to get information about what they have is good. But yeah, it just seems weird to put it in a pre-constructed deck. I think that's what I meant. It's I don't think it's an effect that really like a new player would get too excited about. And you know, ultimately that's what these decks are targeted at. Really, I think is new players. Anyway, 2 Predicts, which is like this weird card. 2 mana. Instant, name a card, put the top card of type player's library into their graveyard. If the card is the named card, you draw 2 cards, otherwise you draw a card. And so it's basically target player mills 1, you draw 1 most of the time, isn't it? I don't think there's really any ways in this deck of like kind of manipulating top deck that much. There's Repel, which I'll talk about now. There's 2 Repels. This is basically instant speed Time Walk. Not Time Walk, geez, not Time Walk. Time Ebb, where you just put a creature on top of its on owner's library, so you could then follow that up with Predict and say like, oh, I think that creature's on top, and obviously it is, so they would then mill it, and then you would draw 2 cards. It's fine. Deluge just taps all creatures that flying, so that's, you know, kind of pretty good. You could just swing out and then do that before they declare blockers, so then they've got nothing to block with. Pretty good. And then 2 Careful Studies. This is really, really good in this deck, because it essentially gives you 3 towards Threshold. Because you draw 2, discard 2, and obviously the Careful Study itself, so you're like halfway to Threshold already with only 1 mana. Very good, I think. And then we have 2 non-basic lands, Seafloor Debris and Timberland Ruins. So these are basically the same. They come into play tapped. They tap to give you 1 mana of a certain color, and you can tap and sacrifice them to give you 1 mana of any color. And then when you sacrifice them, obviously they're in your graveyard, and then you hit Threshold quicker. So yeah. So this is what could have been. Not much would change, honestly. I think it's pretty well put together. Abashan's Desire might have been fun. So this is an aura that gives the enchanted creature flying, and when you have Threshold, it gets Shroud as well. And I just think you have like so many big creatures. Like if you put this on a Metamorphic Worm, even if you don't have, well, actually no, if you do hit Threshold, it'd be amazing. It'd be a 7/7 flying with Shroud. That'd be amazing. So yeah. I just think that would have been fun to have in here. You've got so many cards already that care about hitting Threshold, you might as well throw this in. Cephalid Colosseum, I think, would have been interesting as a non-basic land. So just gives you blue, but it does damage to you. But if you have Threshold, you can pay 1 blue, tap, sacrifice it. Target player draws 3 and then discards 3. So it kind of... It would help you a little bit, I guess, because I mean, it would get you deeper into Threshold. Because like Graveyard Hate was a thing, but just I think drawing 3 and discarding 3 is like a pretty strong effect to put on a non-basic land. That would have been pretty good, I think. And then a couple of rares. So I think these could have been instead of. Oh my word! Oh, Ivy Elemental is the rare, isn't it? I almost forgot what the rare was, which is never a good sign if I can't remember what the rare is. So yeah, either Nut Collector or Croson Beast, I think. So Nut Collector is 6 mana, so it's pretty pricey. He's only a 1/1. The beginning upkeep, you make a 1/1 green squirrel, but Threshold, all your squirrels get +2/+2. That could have been okay. I think he's a little expensive though for what he does. Well, he's very expensive. He's 6 mana for a 1/1, which is that's pretty bad actually. In retrospect, Croson Beast though, 4 mana for a 1/1, but when you have Threshold, it gets +7/+7, becomes a big 8/8, and I just think that goes in nicely with the theme of, you know, these tiny little creatures suddenly becoming much bigger when you have Threshold. And God, I really wish it had Trample, like if it got Trample when it had Threshold, but I just feel like the implication of this tiny squirrel. When you hit Threshold, it becomes like this massive eldritch beast. Yeah, just really fun. But yeah, on the whole, I think it's what's in the deck is already pretty good. So in summary, if you can't tell, I think this is probably the best of the Odyssey theme decks. Like blue green go together so well in this block. They complement each other so well. You've got like this. This is basically doing what the liftoff deck was trying to do, but like much better. So I think it does a better job than the 1/2 punch does of kind of like just having like a lot of creatures attacking one another. I think does that much better. Yeah. I think this deck's pretty great. I would have been really happy to have this deck, and not just because it's blue green, although that definitely helps. So that's my thoughts on Trounce-o-Matic. What are your thoughts after seeing the deck list? Did you have this deck? Did you play with it? Did you make any changes to it? Did you like the name Trounce-o-Matic? I mean, I'm not going to judge if you do. But yeah, that's all the Odyssey pre-constructed decks. I'm going to be back next time. I'm going to start looking at the theme decks from Torment, which is the next set in Odyssey block. But until then, thank you for watching and listening, and have a great day.